Did you ever imagine a man so feared, so untouchable, that loneliness could pierce him deeper than any threat? Alexander Drake, the Mafia boss known for his iron rule and icy stare, sits alone in his towering office, the city lights flickering against the rain-streaked windows. The hum of the city feels distant, almost irrelevant, as he stares at the empty crib he never thought he would have. Tonight, the storm outside mirrors the storm inside him, pounding against the glass, relentless and unforgiving. He pours a glass of whiskey, hands trembling slightly, not from the drink but from a longing he cannot name, a gap in his life that no amount of power or respect can fill. The phone buzzes insistently on the mahogany desk, messages from loyal lieutenants and warnings of rival movements, but his attention is elsewhere, pulled by a whisper of sound from the balcony, subtle but undeniable. A faint, shivering cry, almost lost beneath the thunder, reaches him. His heart jolts, a sensation unfamiliar and electric, making him rise from the chair, the floor creaking under his polished shoes. He steps into the hall, every footstep echoing in the cavernous space, following the sound that seems impossibly fragile against the storm. Outside, the rain lashes violently, soaking the tailored coat he instinctively pulls tighter around himself, yet he does not hesitate. Then there they are, two tiny bodies huddled in the corner, drenched, trembling, eyes wide and terrified. His breath catches. He kneels, careful, as if touching them too roughly could shatter them, wrapping them in his coat with a tenderness that surprises even him. Time slows. He notices their tiny hands gripping at his sleeves, a silent plea for warmth and safety, and he feels an unfamiliar surge of protectiveness, raw and consuming. But the city does not pause for this fragile moment. From a nearby alley, a shadow moves, ambiguous, hinting at uncertainty, the wind carrying the faintest threat, or maybe it is only his imagination sharpening with instinct. Alexander rises, the infant secure against his chest, heart pounding in rhythm with the storm, mind racing with every possible outcome. Every second feels loaded, every movement deliberate yet instinctive. He steps toward shelter, his eyes darting, scanning, calculating, aware of how quickly the delicate balance between safety and disaster could tip. A flash of lightning illuminates the narrow streets, and he senses the world. Beyond his control, but within his arms, there is a small universe he must protect at all costs. And as the first steps of a long journey begin, Alexander cannot shake the feeling that tonight is only the beginning, that the rain has washed something into his life that he cannot return, leaving him with a question he cannot yet answer. Alexander Drake carries the two infants through the narrow, rain-slicked streets, every step calculated, every glance alert, aware that the city does not pause for those who are vulnerable. The wind bites at his face, and the cold soaks through his coat, but he barely notices, his focus entirely on the fragile lives in his arms. Each small sound, the flutter of a bird, the distant honk of a taxi, the drip of water from an awning, makes his senses sharper, his pulse faster. He reaches a secluded building, the door slightly ajar, and he slips inside, shivering, dripping water onto the polished floor, careful not to jostle the babies. They coo softly, and he feels a warmth blooming in his chest that he has never known, a connection that is as terrifying as it is exhilarating. He sets them down gently on a makeshift bed, wrapping them in spare blankets, noticing how tiny their hands are, how they curl instinctively around his fingers when he brushes their hair from their faces. Every small movement is a reminder of their fragility, every coo and sigh a reminder of the responsibility that now rests on him. The office, once a place of authority and command, now feels hollow compared to the presence of these new lives. He paces the room, mind racing with questions he cannot yet answer, wondering who left them, why, and whether they are truly safe. Outside, the storm continues, and the city hums with activity that seems distant, almost irrelevant, except for the way shadows dance across the walls, hinting at uncertainties he cannot ignore. His gaze falls on the smallest details, the dampness of the blankets, the faint shiver of a tiny shoulder, the way the streetlight flickers through the window, and he feels a protective urge so intense it is almost painful. He begins to talk softly to them, words barely audible over the rain, telling them that they are safe, that he will not let anything harm them, though his own heart pounds with fear and anticipation. Time stretches, moments blending into one another as he shifts between feeding, soothing, and scanning the windows for any sign of threat. Each sigh of relief is immediately followed by a tension that coils tighter inside him, a mixture of dread and wonder at the sudden inversion of his life. When the storm finally begins to wane, he allows himself a moment to breathe, to feel the weight of what has changed, and yet he cannot shake the feeling that this is only the beginning. That outside the fragile walls of this temporary sanctuary, something waits, something unknown, something that could shift everything again in an instant. Alexander Drake sits on the edge of the worn sofa, cradling one of the infants against his chest while the other sleeps peacefully beside him, the soft hum of the city outside barely audible over the quiet panic that churns in his mind. Every decision now feels monumental, every movement carries weight, and the reality of his new responsibility presses down on him with a force he has never known. Rachel steps into the room, eyes wide, water dripping from her coat, and Alexander feels a mixture of relief and tension surge through him. Her presence is both a comfort and a challenge. She speaks softly but firmly, questioning his sudden choices, probing the fear he tries to mask beneath his stoic expression. He meets her gaze, jaw tight, struggling to convey the protection he feels and the vulnerability he cannot voice. The infants stir, small cries cutting through the charged silence, and Alexander rocks them gently, whispering promises he has never believed he could keep, the words tasting foreign yet essential on his tongue. Each soft sound from the babies triggers an avalanche of emotion, hope and dread colliding inside him, making his chest tighten, his breath shallow. Rachel moves closer, her hand hovering over the blankets, hesitating as if afraid to disrupt the fragile order of this new world. Alexander flinches slightly, not from fear of her but from the fragile trust that teeters between them, aware that one misstep could shatter the delicate connection they are both beginning to forge. The storm outside has faded, leaving a heavy, suffocating quiet that amplifies every heartbeat, every sigh, every micro-expression that passes between them. Alexander feels the weight of choice pressing down, realizing that not only must he protect these lives, but he must also navigate the complex, unspoken tension with Rachel, whose eyes reflect both worry and something that makes his own pulse stutter. Questions swirl. Who abandoned the babies? Who can be trusted? The walls of the room, once a sanctuary, now feel thin, permeable to the uncertainties of the world outside and the raw emotions within. As he adjusts the blankets around the sleeping infants, a sudden knock at the door startles them all, a reminder that nothing is certain, that every moment of calm could shift in an instant. Alexander rises slowly, instinctively positioning himself between the door and the children, mind racing, calculating, every nerve alert. Rachel lingers near the doorway, watching him, her expression a mixture of concern and unspoken admiration, and Alexander catches the briefest flicker of emotion that unsettles him more than any external threat. In that suspended instant, he realizes that his life has irreversibly changed, that every action from this moment on carries stakes higher than any battle he has ever fought. The infants shift in his arms, tiny fingers brushing his hand, and a faint sound, a whispered cry or perhaps a soft laugh, draws his attention to a detail he cannot yet comprehend, leaving a question lingering in the air, a subtle twist hinting that the answers he seeks may arrive from an unexpected direction. Alexander Drake stands frozen for a moment, the knock at the door lingering like a pulse in the silent room, his mind racing as the infants shift slightly in his arms. Every instinct screams caution, yet every fiber of his being urges him to act with compassion. Rachel steps closer, her eyes locking onto his, a mixture of determination and concern reflecting back at him, challenging him without a word. The tension between them is palpable, a silent dialogue layered with unspoken fears and fragile trust. Alexander takes a deep breath, weighing the risks. He knows opening the door could expose them to unknown threats, yet keeping it closed might betray the small sanctuary he is struggling to maintain. The knock comes again, firmer this time, echoing through the room and forcing him to make a choice. His hand hovers over the handle, muscles tense, every heartbeat echoing in his ears, while the infants stir, sensing the shift in his energy. Rachel places a reassuring hand on his shoulder, a silent offer of alliance, and he feels a complicated mix of relief and unease. He opens the door slightly, just enough to peer through the gap, and the dim light outside reveals a figure he does not recognize, cloaked in shadow, holding a small package that could be a clue or a threat. The air is thick with anticipation, every detail amplified: the faint smell of rain, the subtle movement of the figure, the soft whimpers of the infants, the way Rachel's eyes dart between him and the stranger. Alexander steps forward cautiously, the infants cradled protectively, his mind calculating every possible outcome, every possible deception, every risk of exposure. The figure speaks in a low, urgent tone, words that carry implications Alexander cannot yet decipher but that ignite a flicker of hope and dread simultaneously. Rachel shifts beside him, her presence both comforting and a reminder that decisions are no longer his alone, that trust and responsibility are intertwined in ways he is only beginning to understand. The room feels smaller, the stakes higher, the tension almost unbearable, as Alexander weighs the next move, knowing that one wrong decision could unravel the fragile safety they have carved out. Every second stretches, every breath counts, and the infants sense the intensity, their small bodies pressing closer to him, anchoring him to the reality that now, more than ever, every choice matters. The figure moves slightly, revealing a glimpse of what they carry, and Alexander realizes that the moment demands a choice he cannot defer, a decision that will define not only the night but the uncertain path that lies ahead, leaving a weight of consequence hanging in the air, a silent threat and a promise wrapped together in the same tense breath. Alexander Drake closes the door gently behind him, the infants resting against his chest, and finally allows himself a moment to breathe, the tension of the past hours weighing heavily on his shoulders. Rachel steps closer, eyes searching his, and in that gaze, he senses both judgment and an unexpected understanding, a recognition that the path they are on is neither simple nor solitary. For the first time, Alexander feels the fragility of the walls he has built around himself, the control he has always wielded, and he realizes that it is Rachel who now holds a quiet, undeniable influence over his choices. He watches her move to adjust the blankets, her hands careful, her movements deliberate. And he feels a pull of dependence he cannot ignore, a vulnerability that scares him more than any external threat. The infants stir, their tiny movements anchoring him to the reality of responsibility, and he experiences an emotional spike that is both thrilling and terrifying, a fusion of protective instinct and recognition that he cannot do this alone. Rachel's voice cuts softly through the room, suggesting a plan, a next step, and Alexander listens intently, the power dynamic subtly shifting as he acknowledges, for the first time, that her insight might surpass his own in certain matters. A silence follows, heavy and charged, as he considers the implications: trust, collaboration, surrendering a fragment of authority for the sake of safety and connection. The infant's quiet breathing fills the space between them, a rhythmic reminder of stakes that are both tender and profound, compelling them toward an unspoken alliance. Alexander steps closer, lowering his gaze to meet Rachel's, and he notices the vulnerability mirrored in her eyes, the flicker of uncertainty softened by determination. In this delicate balance, they find a temporary equilibrium, a momentary truce between caution and necessity, between fear and hope. The room feels smaller, the air denser, each movement carrying weight, each glance a negotiation of trust and dependence. Alexander's hand brushes against Rachel's inadvertently, and the simple touch carries a resonance that startles him, a reminder that connection is as much a choice as it is an accident. The infants shift again, tiny sighs escaping them, pulling both adults further into the emotional orbit they now inhabit, and Alexander realizes that the night has transformed them all, creating bonds that are fragile yet fiercely compelling. Just as he begins to contemplate the next move, the faintest creak from the apartment above alerts him, a subtle shift in the environment that hints at imminent revelation, forcing Alexander and Rachel to lock eyes, understanding instantly that the decisions they make in the next moments will irrevocably change the trajectory of their lives. The weight of the night presses heavier against Alexander Drake as he moves cautiously through the apartment, the infants nestled securely against his chest, their soft breaths grounding him in the fragile calm that he knows cannot last. Rachel follows closely, her eyes scanning the shadows, her presence a steadying force yet also a reminder of the unspoken tension between them, the delicate balance of trust. They have been building. Every creak of the floor, every distant sound from the street below, sets Alexander's nerves on edge, reminding him that each choice carries consequences he cannot yet predict. He pauses at the living room window, peering into the darkened alley below, realizing that the figure who approached earlier may not be alone, that the world outside is alive with uncertainty, and that their sanctuary is more vulnerable than he dared to acknowledge. Rachel speaks softly, suggesting they move the infants to a safer corner, and Alexander nods, the decision simple yet laden with responsibility, each movement deliberate to avoid startling the children. As he adjusts the blankets and shifts the infants, he feels a sudden, subtle vibration through the floor, a faint but unmistakable signal that they are not entirely alone. His gaze meets Rachel's, a silent exchange conveying urgency, awareness, and a shared resolve that neither of them can ignore. The air grows taut with anticipation, every heartbeat echoing in the quiet room, every glance and gesture heightened by the knowledge that the smallest mistake could unravel their fragile safety. Alexander's mind races through possibilities, questioning loyalties, assessing threats, and yet at the center of all calculations is the undeniable bond forming between him and Rachel, a connection strengthened by necessity and the raw vulnerability imposed by their charge. Suddenly, a shadow passes across the wall, abrupt and swift, and the infants stir, tiny hands reaching instinctively, anchoring Alexander further in the present, demanding immediate attention. The moment stretches, tension coiling tightly as he steps forward, positioning himself between the source of movement and the children, while Rachel braces, ready to act. The room is a crucible of decisions, the stakes amplified, the air thick with expectation, and Alexander realizes that he is no longer acting solely for control or power but for lives that now depend entirely on him. Just as he reaches the corner to reposition the infants, a faint sound of movement from the hallway signals that someone, or something, has entered without warning, and the realization hits that their temporary haven may already be compromised, forcing Alexander and Rachel to confront the immediate danger together, hearts pounding, instincts sharpened, and trust tested in a way that will irrevocably shift everything they thought they understood about each other. Alexander Drake freezes as the subtle creak from the hallway grows louder, each step deliberate, sending a jolt of adrenaline through his veins. The infants shift in his arms, tiny faces scrunching in confusion, and he tightens his hold instinctively, feeling the full weight of responsibility pressing down like a physical force. Rachel moves swiftly beside him, her eyes scanning every shadow, her hand brushing lightly against his arm, a gesture of reassurance and shared vigilance that sparks a new awareness in Alexander, a recognition that he cannot face this alone. The hallway darkens as the figure he sensed earlier emerges, indistinct yet undeniably present, and Alexander's heart pounds, every decision stretching across the fragile line between caution and necessity. He steps forward, positioning himself to shield the children, while Rachel subtly adjusts the blankets, her movements calm yet commanding, forcing him to acknowledge the power in her composure, the influence she now exerts over the room. Words are unnecessary, their coordination instinctive, and Alexander feels the rare, electric clarity of connection forged under pressure. The figure pauses, and in that moment, Alexander's mind races through every possible outcome, every risk, every sacrifice that might be required, the infant's soft breathing anchoring him, a reminder that some stakes are beyond power, beyond control. Rachel meets his gaze, a silent question, and he nods, signaling trust and the shared burden, a pivotal shift that alters the balance between them, blending dependence with respect. The figure moves closer, and a sudden, unexpected sound, a drop of water, a faint shuffle, echoes through the narrow space, causing the infants to stir, their small cries slicing through the tense silence. Alexander takes a deep breath, his jaw set, and makes a decisive move, stepping slightly forward to block the approach, signaling both authority and protection. Rachel mirrors his movement, their synergy unmistakable, a combined force that transcends fear and hesitation. The room vibrates with anticipation, every heartbeat magnified, every micro-expression heightened, as the intruder halts, and for a brief, suspended moment, time seems to hang on the edge of a knife. Alexander's gaze shifts from the figure to Rachel and then to the infants, understanding fully that the choices made in the next seconds will irrevocably define their immediate survival and the fragile trust they have cultivated. The figure takes one last step forward, and suddenly, the soft whisper of movement reveals a detail previously unnoticed, a subtle clue or hidden intent that transforms the entire scenario, leaving Alexander, Rachel, and the infants poised on the brink of a revelation that will shatter assumptions and force an immediate, irrevocable response. The figure halts abruptly, revealing a small envelope clutched in one hand, and Alexander Drake feels a sudden, piercing uncertainty tighten in his chest, the infants shifting against him as if sensing the shift in tension. Rachel leans slightly forward, her eyes narrowing, and for the first time, Alexander notices a subtle flicker of fear crossing her face, a shadow of doubt he has never seen, and it unsettles him more than any unknown threat outside. He steps closer to the figure, careful, deliberate, trying to read intentions through posture and silence, while the infants nestle closer to his chest, anchoring him even as adrenaline pulses through his veins. The envelope is extended slowly, as if testing trust, and Alexander hesitates, every instinct screaming caution yet curiosity urging forward, a mixture of anticipation and dread knotting in his stomach. Rachel's hand hovers near his, a silent offer of alliance and support, her expression taut with the weight of shared responsibility, and he realizes that their bond has shifted irrevocably. She is no longer a companion but an essential presence in every decision, every calculation. He finally takes the envelope, breaking the fragile silence, and the figure retreats into the shadows, leaving a lingering question that hangs like smoke in the air, invisible yet suffocating. Alexander opens it carefully, his eyes scanning the contents, each line pulling at his chest, a revelation that threatens to rewrite what he thought he knew about the night, about trust, and about the precarious safety of the infants. Rachel leans closer, glancing over his shoulder, and the weight of their intertwined fates presses down, a heavy realization that their choices carry consequences far beyond their control. The infants stir, small cries cutting through the thick tension, and Alexander rocks them gently, whispering reassurances he barely feels himself, the vulnerability of the moment making him ache with both protectiveness and helplessness. The quiet hum of the city outside contrasts sharply with the sudden storm of emotion and uncertainty inside the apartment, every heartbeat echoing in the charged air, every glance between him and Rachel conveying more than words could express. As the minutes stretch, Alexander feels the full scope of what has changed: authority, trust, and emotional dependence all inextricably woven together in a single, fragile thread. Rachel's eyes meet his, reflecting a mixture of resolve and worry, and in that instant he understands that their path forward is uncertain, fraught with risk, yet impossible to abandon. The envelope rests in his hand, small and deceptively simple, yet it contains a truth that could unravel the fragile security they have fought to maintain, leaving a silence filled with unspoken questions, and a realization that what comes next may alter everything they thought they could control. Alexander Drake holds the envelope tightly, feeling the weight of its contents pressing against his chest, the infants nestled close, their small warmth grounding him amidst the storm of revelation. Rachel leans closer, her breath quiet, eyes sharp and alert, and Alexander senses a shift in the dynamic between them, an unspoken acknowledgement that the control he once wielded is now shared, subtly but irrevocably. As he reads the words inside, the truth hits like a sudden, cold gust. The infants are not merely abandoned, they are connected to forces and secrets far beyond his immediate understanding, threads that tie back to people he has long considered allies and enemies alike. His mind reels, processing the implications, the delicate balance of safety and risk now in flux, and he feels the tension coiling tighter in his chest, a mix of fear and exhilaration. Rachel's hand brushes against his arm, a grounding presence, yet her expression carries something he cannot yet decipher, a hint of knowledge or insight that challenges him to reassess what he thought he controlled. The infants stir slightly, their tiny eyes opening, reflecting an innocence untouched by the weight of adult decisions, and Alexander feels a protective surge, but also the awareness that he cannot shield them from all consequences. He shifts, adjusting the blankets, and in that movement, he realizes Rachel has positioned herself to see every angle of the room, every entrance, every shadow, her alertness rivaling his own, and he is struck by the power of her presence, by the subtle reversal where her insight and decisiveness now guide some of his choices. A sudden sound outside, a faint scraping, almost imperceptible, draws their attention, and Alexander instinctively moves to shield the infants while Rachel steps to intercept, their movements fluid, complementary. But the realization settles heavy in his chest. The nights ahead will demand trust, collaboration, and sacrifice in ways neither of them anticipated. The envelope flutters slightly in his hand as he rereads a line, and his eyes widen, a secret revealed that changes the stakes entirely. The infant's arrival was orchestrated, not random, and the implications reach into circles he never imagined, suggesting motives, connections, and threats that upend everything he believed about loyalty and intention. Rachel's gaze meets his, steady and challenging, and Alexander feels the shift fully. He is no longer the sole architect of the situation, no longer in complete control, and the understanding creates both tension and a strange, compelling alignment. As the room falls silent again, the infants nestled quietly, Alexander feels the full weight of what has changed, the balance of power, the trust between them, and the unseen forces now threading through their lives. And just as he begins to formulate a response, a second envelope, smaller and unmarked, slips silently through the cracked door, a tangible message from the unknown that threatens to redraw the map of alliances and dangers entirely. Alexander Drake grips the second envelope, its weight seeming heavier than any physical object he has ever held, the infants pressed tightly against his chest as if sensing the gravity of the moment. Rachel's eyes meet his, wide and sharp, reflecting both alarm and unwavering focus, and Alexander realizes that in this instant, every choice he makes carries irreversible consequences. The apartment, once a refuge, now feels constricted, each shadow and whisper magnified, every sound outside a potential threat or clue, each heartbeat echoing in tandem with the tension building between them. He tears open the envelope, scanning the contents with rapid precision, his mind racing as new information surfaces, linking the infants to people and events he had never imagined, reshaping his understanding of loyalty, trust, and the very fabric of his world. Rachel moves closer, subtly placing herself between him and the hallway, a silent acknowledgement of partnership, yet the unspoken question remains: who can they trust, and what will they sacrifice to protect what is theirs? The infants stir, tiny hands brushing against Alexander's fingers, grounding him, pulling his focus to the lives entirely dependent on his next moves, and he feels a surge of protective urgency, a fierce determination mixed with raw, unfiltered fear. Each passing second tightens the coil of tension, the room charged with anticipation, uncertainty, and the pressure of unseen eyes and unknown motives. Alexander glances at Rachel, their connection unspoken, yet undeniable, and recognizes that the equilibrium of power between them has shifted. She is no longer an observer, but a vital, guiding presence, her judgment and intuition as critical as his own authority. A sudden noise from the building's exterior, a faint metallic scrape, almost lost beneath the hum of the city, snaps both of them into heightened awareness, instincts flaring, every sense on edge, and Alexander realizes that the window for action is closing, that hesitation now could lead to irreparable loss. He takes a steadying breath, scanning the envelopes, the infants, and Rachel, calculating risks, potential sacrifices, and outcomes with a clarity born of both desperation and necessity. The information in the envelopes reveals a path forward, yet it is fraught with danger, demanding decisions that could redefine alliances, challenge his morality, and place the children in the balance. Every instinct, every emotion, every ounce of his focus converges into a single, intense awareness. The next move will determine not only their immediate safety but the trajectory of their entwined futures. As he lifts his gaze toward Rachel, ready to speak, ready to decide, a subtle shift in the shadows hints at movement, a presence unseen until this moment, forcing a pause, a hesitation that stretches impossibly long, and leaving Alexander, Rachel, and the infants poised on the precipice of a choice that cannot be undone. Alexander Drake finally sets the infants gently into a makeshift crib, their soft breathing filling the room with a fragile calm, and he leans back against the wall, feeling the weight of the night slowly recede, replaced by an exhaustion mingled with profound relief. Rachel sits beside him, close enough for their shoulders to touch, and in that quiet contact, a wordless understanding passes between them, a recognition that their lives have shifted irrevocably, bound now by trust, sacrifice, and the fragile innocence they have protected together. The envelopes lie on the table, evidence of the chaos and secrets that had threatened to overwhelm them, yet their presence now seems manageable, contained, part of the story they have navigated and survived. Alexander's eyes fall on the infants, tiny chests rising and falling, and he feels an emotional clarity he has never known before, the full spectrum of fear, responsibility, and love converging in one luminous, terrifying, and beautiful moment. Rachel's hand finds his, fingers brushing lightly, and he realizes that the power he once wielded alone has transformed into a shared strength, a partnership forged in the crucible of uncertainty and choice. The room is quiet, the city hum distant, and yet Alexander can feel the pulse of life beyond these walls, carrying the echo of the night's events, the lessons learned, and the bonds cemented under pressure. He exhales slowly, allowing himself to absorb the significance of what has occurred, acknowledging the depth of trust placed in him, and the depth of trust he has come to place in Rachel. The infants shift, small murmurs escaping them, and Alexander leans forward instinctively, brushing their tiny hands, whispering promises he is now ready to uphold without hesitation. Rachel watches, a subtle smile softening her expression, and Alexander senses the unspoken vow between them, to protect, to guide, and to endure together. The storm outside has finally passed, leaving only the soft patter of residual rain against the windows, a gentle reminder that chaos may always exist, but it can be weathered, contained, and transformed into connection and resilience. In this suspended, serene moment, Alexander reflects on the night, on the choices that demanded courage, on the unexpected responsibilities that have reshaped his life, and on the realization that strength is not merely wielded, but shared, nurtured, and made meaningful through care and connection. And as he sits there, the infants breathing peacefully, Rachel beside him, and the envelope still unopened, he feels a lingering moral echo, a reminder that true power lies not in control alone, but in the courage to embrace vulnerability and the capacity to protect those who depend on you. Alexander Drake sits quietly in the soft glow of the city lights filtering through the rain-streaked windows, the infants resting peacefully in the makeshift crib he has come to cherish, and he feels a profound shift within himself, a calm understanding that life has changed in ways he could never have anticipated. Rachel sits beside him, her hand lightly touching his, a subtle acknowledgement of the trust and partnership forged through the chaos, and Alexander realizes that authority and control are no longer solely his domain. They are shared, tempered by empathy and mutual respect. The envelopes lie untouched on the table, reminders of secrets and forces that could resurface at any moment, yet tonight they hold only the weight of lessons learned, of insight gained through decisions made under pressure, each choice leaving its mark on his soul. He leans back, eyes tracing the gentle rise and fall of the infant's breathing, and a wave of gratitude washes over him, mingling with a sense of responsibility that is now inseparable from affection. Rachel's gaze shifts toward him, a quiet question lingering in her eyes, and Alexander responds with a nod, conveying understanding without words, a silent promise that they will navigate whatever comes next together. The room is filled with a delicate silence, punctuated only by the distant hum of the city and the soft stirrings of the children, a rhythm that mirrors the slow, steady pulse of his own heart coming into alignment with a life that is both more fragile and more meaningful than he could have imagined. He reflects on the choices that brought them here, the moments of fear, hesitation, and courage, understanding that true strength is measured not in power alone but in the willingness to protect, to nurture, and to trust. Rachel shifts slightly, her presence a reminder that bonds formed under pressure can endure, and Alexander feels the last vestiges of solitude dissolve, replaced by connection, accountability, and the quiet, resilient hope that has been seated in the midst of turmoil. As he watches the infants sleep, a small sound catches his attention, a soft, almost imperceptible knock at the window, the flutter of a shadow passing by, and he feels the familiar stir of alertness, a reminder that the world beyond this sanctuary continues, full of unknowns and possibilities. Yet, in this moment, he knows that the foundations of his life have been irrevocably altered, that the experiences of the night have reshaped him and the relationships he values most, leaving a lingering sense of anticipation, a subtle, open-ended invitation for the next chapter of their intertwined journey to unfold. Alexander Drake sits in the quiet apartment, the soft glow of city lights casting gentle shadows across the room, the infants nestled peacefully in their crib, and a sense of completion settles over him, heavy yet comforting. Rachel leans back against the wall, her hand brushing lightly against his, a subtle acknowledgement of the journey they have endured together, the trials and uncertainties that have reshaped both their lives and their bond. The envelopes, now read and understood, lie untouched, symbols of challenges faced and secrets revealed, and Alexander feels the full weight of responsibility transformed into a profound sense of purpose. Every choice, every moment of fear, hesitation, and courage has culminated in this stillness, where the storm outside is finally mirrored by the calm inside, a reflection of endurance, trust, and connection. He watches the infants, their small hands curling instinctively, their breathing steady, and he realizes that the lives he holds are the catalysts for his own transformation, that love and responsibility are intertwined in ways he had never imagined. Rachel smiles softly, her eyes conveying both relief and an unspoken promise, and Alexander recognizes that the dynamic between them has irrevocably shifted, a partnership forged in challenge, strengthened by compassion, and solidified by shared vulnerability. The room is filled with a gentle rhythm, the quiet murmurs of the city outside harmonizing with the tender sounds of new life, and Alexander allows himself to feel the depth of accomplishment, the reward of protecting innocence while embracing change. He reflects on the nights of tension, the moments of fear and decision, the clarity that emerged from chaos, and the unshakable truth that power alone is meaningless without care, without connection, without the courage to act when the stakes are highest. Rachel's presence beside him, steady and unwavering, reinforces the lesson, the emotional payoff of trust, collaboration, and resilience, and Alexander knows that the path ahead, while uncertain, will be navigated together, fortified by the experiences they have survived and the love that now anchors them. The infants stir softly, small sighs that echo a life renewed and a future uncharted, and Alexander leans forward instinctively, brushing a gentle hand over their heads, a gesture of protection, of devotion, of hope. In that moment, the city beyond the windows feels vast yet distant, irrelevant compared to the life inside, and he understands fully that the most profound power is not the one imposed upon others but the one nurtured within, the one that grows through care, courage, and unwavering commitment. The night stretches, calm yet alive, carrying the echoes of everything endured, and Alexander Drake allows himself a deep, steady breath, knowing that the journey has transformed him, Rachel, and the children in ways that will endure, leaving a moral echo resounding through the stillness. True strength is measured not in control, but in the love we choose to protect and the lives we choose to cherish.